Hello everyone. There is a huge misconception that is revolving around starting a new business. The founders of new businesses or new startups go through huge mental trauma before they could conclude on which legal structure of business that they should opt for. There are four major types of legal structure which is available in India. I would give you a brief explanation of all the four major structures so that it would be helpful for the new business owners or the new founders to decide on which kind of a legal structure that you should opt in for your business type. Okay, so there are four major classifications. One is a sole proprietorship, and then the second one is a partnership firm, and the third one is a private limited, and the fourth one is a public limited company. Okay, so what is the major difference between all these four different types of legal structures of the businesses? Okay, the very important key factor that you would have to decide would be liability. Okay, so the liability is the very important key factor which you would have to decide before you conclude on which kind of a legal structure would fit in for your business. So what does this liability factor explain? So what liability would the business owners or the people who operate the business go through, and what are the obligations that they would have to cross? Initially, with the sole proprietorship company, it is 100% liable, and the liability is unlimited on the owner of the business. Sole proprietorship is nothing but a virtual entity that you create on your behalf. The sole proprietorship is where that resonates and replicates you altogether. I mean, the business owner altogether, the founder altogether. So whatever merits, demerits, profits, losses or obligations or any litigations or whatsoever comes in, the sole proprietor will be responsible for the same. So when it comes to sole proprietorship, it is that single person who has to take responsibility, and his liability towards the business and towards any act or obligation of the business is unlimited, is 100%. Okay. Is registration of a sole proprietorship mandatory? No. Registration of a sole proprietorship is not mandatory. But in case if you have to go through GST, you would have to accrue the GST registrations. But your income tax filings for the financial year and everything would be on the individual person's PAN card number. So everything will be tied up towards your personal income and towards your PAN number. So in other words, a sole proprietorship is just a resonance of you as a owner. And when it comes to partnership businesses, there are two major classifications of partnerships. The first one is a regular partnership, and the second one is limited liability partnerships, which is called as an LLP. The general partnership is governed by the Indian Partnership Act 1932. When two or more people come together to form a business or to invest their time, hard work, money into a idea which they trust in is called a partnership. So registration of a partnership is the choice of the partners, but at the same time it has to commence with an agreement. There has to be a partnership agreement between the partners. The liability of a partnership, of a general partnership, is also 100% on the owners. For example, let's say A and B join together to form a partnership called XYZ partnership firm, whereas A owns 75% of the shares and B owns only 25% of the shares. So what is the liability of A and B towards the company, and what is the obligations that A and B have towards the company? For example, if the XYZ company is liable to pay a financial institution rupees 1 lakh. So in that situation, how much do you think A is liable and how much do you think B is liable? Their partnership share for A is 75% and for B is 25%. In that case being so, the liability on A would be 100% and the liability on B would also be 100%. B cannot escape from the liability, stating that my share in the business is 25%. So if I pay 25,000, I can be out of this liability. No, unless 100% of the liability is settled, B would also be liable. In case of a mischievous act or in case of an illegal or unlawful act, and if the government or any third party sues, both the partners will be liable. So the percentage of share doesn't come into picture. The percentage of share in a general partnership comes only when profit and loss accrues. If you take profit, the profit would be shared in 75% and 25%. If it is a loss, 75% and 25%. But when it comes to liability or obligation, it is 100%. So there is no much difference between a proprietorship and a general partnership. The only difference is, in a general partnership, more than one person indulge in the business. So what is a limited liability partnership? In a limited liability partnership, the limited liability partnership is governed by the Companies Act 2013. So what is the difference between normal partnership and a limited liability partnership? As the word suggests, the liability is the difference. In this previous example, A holds 75% of the shares and B holds 25% of the shares in a general partnership. Assume the same scenario in a limited liability partnership. In that case, if the liability amount is 1 lakh, then in this scenario, if the company registered is a limited liability partnership firm, then A is liable only to pay 75,000 and B is liable to pay only 25,000, which is equivalent to the percentage of share or percentage of liability that they have taken on the business. So what is a private limited company then? What is the huge difference between proprietorship, partnership and private limited? So when it comes to private limited company, the story is totally different. The private limited company can be formed with a minimum number of 2 directors and 2 shareholders. Okay. And to a maximum of 200 shareholders and 200 directors can accommodate in a private limited company. The private limited company is not run by the owners of the business. The private limited company is run by the board of directors. It is not mandatory that every shareholder should be a director of the business. No. The shareholders can just stay as an investors of the business. And the whole business is run by the board of directors and it is governed by the managing director. In a private limited company, what is the liability? The liability in a private limited company is also equivalent to the percentage of share that you hold. In case of any unlawful act or any illegal act, the shareholders will not be liable. The director, the managing director who executes and operates the business is the one who would be liable, and the board of directors would be secondly liable. But the shareholders would be liable only when the profit and loss comes into picture. So the liability in terms of money, in terms of financial transactions on the shareholders will be equivalent to the shares that they hold. But at the same time, the liability of an unlawful act will not affect or bind the shareholders. It would bind only the managing director and other board of directors. Private limited is a very huge concept, so I would cover it separately in a separate video. There is one more new concept that has been introduced by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which resonates to a private limited company, which is called one person company, which is an OPC. OPC means a similar structure of a private limited company, but it is run by one single director. So which is more or less equivalent to sole proprietorship business, but at the same time the business can be run by that particular director and the shareholder can be somebody else. So one shareholder and one director. One shareholder and one director would run the business. So in terms of financial liability, the shareholders will be responsible, and in terms of any illegal or unlawful act, any act against the government, the liability would be on the director who runs and operates the business. When it comes to public limited company, it is again a resonance of a private limited company, but the shareholders would be public, who would not be known to each other. It can be a public offering. So public limited company is also a huge and a vast concept which I would cover in a separate video. In public limited company also, the liability, the financial liability would lie on the shareholders equivalent to the shares that they hold in the business, and any unlawful act of the business would obligate only the directors and the managing director and the chairman of the company, and not the shareholders. Hereby I conclude the 4 major legal structures that is present in India. As I said, sole proprietorship, partnership, private limited and public limited company. So when it comes to sole proprietorship, the liability is unlimited on the owner, on the proprietor himself. And when it comes to partnership, again the liability is unlimited on both the partners or on all the partners of the business. When it comes to the second wing of the partnership, which is called limited liability, the liability is equivalent to the percentage of shares that the partner holds in the business. Again, when it comes to private limited company, the financial liability lies on the shareholders equivalent to the share that they hold, but at the same time, any unlawful act or any kind of a mischievous act by the business would affect the directors and the board of directors who operate the business. The same would apply to the public limited companies as well. So the board of directors and the chairman of the public limited company will be liable for any kind of an unlawful act. But at the same time, when it comes to revenue loss or revenue gain, in the public limited company, the shareholders will benefit. So hereby I conclude this video, which explains the basic and a very important factor that you have to consider before you decide which kind of a legal structure you should opt in. So in the upcoming videos, I would explain what are the benefits of a proprietorship firm, partnership firm, private limited and public limited company. Once you go through those videos, you will know if you plan to come up with a startup with an innovative idea where you look forward for foreign investors, or if you look forward for venture capitalists to come and invest in your business, and in that case, what kind of a company would you have to opt in? And in case if you would want to bring in third-party investors into the business, or if you would want to bring in people who build strategies for your business, in that cases what you would have to do. And also I would put a separate video on ESOPs, employee stock options. How can you develop more interest among your employees to work towards the well-being of the company by giving them shares through ESOPs. Thank you everybody for watching this video, and thank you for all your time. Wish you a good day.